welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Around the Association. This is what was the ASCA Weekly Podcast the last two seasons, but it is rebranded to the new name, Around the Association, obviously ATA, brought to you by your host, Charles Fallon, back in here for another episode, another season, and boy, it's fitting that we have this rebrand as we enter a new era of ASCA racing. There's so many things that are changing this year. We lost Nick Orchidi. He obviously retired in the off season. We're going to lose Randall Woods after the season. He's embarking on his farewell tour. Obviously, brand new sweeping regulations. We've seen V6 turbo hybrid engines, 900 horsepower. That's how much HP they produce. Tons of ponies under the hood now, composite bodies, and what ASCA race director Bob Halpert says will be the closest grid in ASCA history. The sport is finally carbon neutral for the first time in its history, so much more environmentally friendly. And it's basically a reset, a great reset on the sport as a whole, specifically the cup level. And when you consider the new faces and the new places that we're going to get over in a bit, there's a potential that we could see things completely flip upside down from the way that they have been, I would say, throughout the decade thus far. We've seen already 5 different Cup Series champions the past 5 years, could very well be 6. And, we could very well see another new champion this season. So we've got a lot to talk about, a lot on the Cup side, but also quite a bit on the Craftsman side as well. A few things changed there. And basically, if you've been living under a rock this all season or just haven't had time to kind of keep up with all the changes, there's been a lot, obviously, that's going to be changing heading into this season. So this would be the episode for you. All the things you missed throughout the off season, anything notable that happened, we're going to recap it for you, and really just get you up to speed, because Speedweeks begins tomorrow, which sounds crazy. I know, it's insane to me that Speedweeks begins tomorrow and we embark on the 12th season of the modern era. It feels like I don't even know, like just yesterday I got the job, covering the ASCA back in 2019. And now here we are, we're 7 years down the line, and so much has changed in the sport since then. So many new stars, new faces, familiar faces, and new rides, retiring drivers. It's just a ton. But yeah, so with all that in mind, without further ado, let's get right into it. But first, before we do, we have to shout out the sport's premier partner, Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. You want free shipping on any ASCA replica diecast, use promo code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more inside the US. So shout out Circle B Diecast, shout out Plan B Sales, and also, hey, if you want official ASC merch, we have a merch shop officially live. You want to get swagged out in your favorite Cup Series Superstars gear prior to Speedweeks kicking off tomorrow, go head on over to the merch shop. We have a sale going on for Speedweeks, and that will likely carry on throughout the entire season, to be quite honest with you. So, we got championship gear from Todd Kidd's title run, Randall Woods' farewell tour, and much, much, much more. So head on over to the ASCA merch shop, click that link in bio, just the top link right there. And go shop yourself something. Even if you want something as small as a sticker, you can go get it there. So, that's about it for the plugs. That's about it for the waffling around. let's get right into it. And we'll begin with obviously the huge sweeping change for this year, new regulations. And this is going to be, I think, the biggest reset the sport has seen since heading into the 2015 season, where we moved to this current style of car from the winged cars. We got back to a spoiler. The cars are much more aerodynamic, less boxy, more sleek. And that's what we've been rolling with for the past 11 seasons. And we're still rolling with that style of car this season, that kind of base style. But obviously, the engines are going to be completely different. As I mentioned, V6 turbo hybrid engine. Since sports carbon neutral now, we're going to have composite bodies as well. And this is huge because the DNF numbers for a lot of drivers have been, especially in recent years, pretty high. It's kind of rare now that you see a driver with 3 or less DNFs in a season. And that's not ideal because that means the teams are blowing a lot of money in repair bills. And, especially what we've seen at these plate tracks, if you hit anything, you're done. You're toast. You bust a radiator, you bust the back end, something breaks, and you're out. And the goal that the ASCA was working on was to make the cars much less fragile. So they came up with, the composite body idea. And so far in testing, um, we haven't seen many cars really bin it. We saw Toby Beckett bin it. He did total his, but he hit pretty hard regardless. So we haven't really seen it in action, but, according to the crash test, the cars take, I believe what I checked was 30% less damage is what they take with the composite bodies now. So, that's a game changer. It really is because, if you don't completely total your car, go flipping or something, you might have a chance to repair. And as we saw in the championship last season, that came down to a tiebreaker. Every last point matters. Every last position matters, especially at the top level of sport. And if you're able to make some repairs and get your car back out there instead of automatically having to retire and finishing 25th, 22nd, 20th, that's a huge hit compared to finishing some laps down and 15. That makes a huge difference at the end of the season if you're fighting for a championship. So I think that's huge. And I don't think that should be understated in terms of its impact and, like how critical of a change that really is. And then obviously the V6 turbo hybrid engines, again, that's a huge change as well. The downforce count, I believe it's 3750 for this season. There's not really any major like car model changes. It's just all about how each manufacturer, Chevy, Ford, Toyota, chooses to allocate that downforce limit across the car. And that coupled with the engine, you just hope to marry them together perfectly to get that lethal combination. And then your guns ablazing, just dominating every week. We'll see. We won't really get to see much of that at Ajax Super Speedway. I don't think we'll get to see much of it at the Streets Computerville, but we will be able to tell, I think, by the time we get to West Virginia, which team really mastered that and which team didn't. But yeah, we thought we learned a lot from the tests, at least from the open test we saw at Computer Motor Speedway. Toyota appeared to be the manufacturer to beat, which would make sense. They've been down for 2 years now, basically. And, if they didn't get this right, it was going to be DEFCON level 5 for them and Michael White Racing specifically, with all the money they have dumped in there with such a future Hall of Famer, like Randall Woods on that team. In his farewell tour season, if you deliver him another tractor, that would be an awful way for him to go out. And they want to deliver something fast for him, but not just for him. They're also paying Burn Renner $13 million a year. They're going to need him to step it up, do better than 13th in points. And then they have a young budding superstar in Braden Bennett, who we saw last season carrying that car up to fourth in the standings. You give him the right package, he can win a title very easily. So Toyota, it'll be huge to see if they can nail those regulations. And so keep a close eye on them. Snoots were also fast. Taylor Motorsports, they were fast. So we could see, Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Arkady Bros Racing have obviously been dominant as of late, the past 2 seasons, but that could completely flip on its head. I think those two teams are obviously powerhouses. They're going to be up there eventually, but they might get off to a slow start, and that could open up the door for a Michael White Racing or CJ Barrymore Racing or Snooze Enterprises or one of these other teams to really pounce and throw their name in the hat, put their name towards the top of the point standings, and who knows, maybe steal a championship in 2026. But we just have no idea what to expect, to be quite honest with you. Who knows? Maybe Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Arkady Racing, they do smash it right out the gate, and we see Kid versus Diego Act 2. And we're gonna get to that in a second. But let's talk about the big silly season moves, and we'll start with the biggest of them all, and that would be obviously Randall Woods announcing his retirement at the end of the season. And in case you missed it, we had a whole episode kind of breaking down that entire saga and how monumental of a moment that was. So I'm not going to go too in detail into it because, we all knew this was coming, and it's been well documented news for about a month and a half now. But I think it is important to touch on because, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best drivers in ASCA history. So all eyes are going to be on him, to see if he can at least score one final win and one final Windows 300. And we'll talk about the whole Windows 300 thing as we get closer to the race date on April 24th. But in terms of, your regular ride switching silly season moves, obviously the major one was Chris Barrymore getting paid a bag, $14 million. $14 million to join Ronnie Woods Motorsports for the 2026 campaign and beyond, for the next 4 seasons, bringing back the iconic number 5. He, I wouldn't say he whined his way out. I'd say he finessed his way out of his father's team, CJ Barrymore Racing. He gets to Ronnie Woods Motorsports, and now for Barrymore, it's really put up or shut up time. There's no more excuses about, I don't get the same equipment as Cameron Atwood. Like that's not going to fly at Ronnie Woods Motorsports. This is a team that just obviously won a championship a season ago. They've won a bunch of races with Todd Kidd, with Shane Park. We know the potential that Colin Ward has. There's no excuses here. And we just saw with Ross Jackson, if you can't win here, you're getting shipped right out the door. They don't care about, you need more time to develop. No, it's put up or shut up time, especially for someone like Barrymore, he's not a rookie. He's been in this business for, I believe this is going to be his 10th season. He's 28 years old. He's got to hit the ground running. And I would say score a championship here within these next 2 to 3 years, if not this year. So obviously the expectations for Barrymore, easily championship or bust, no doubt about it. We briefly talked about Ross Jackson and how he was booted out of Ronnie Woods Motorsports. He ends up landing on his feet at Flores Motorsports. And I really like this hire for Flores, though. They pair him with a former championship winning crew chief in Sheldon Price from Arkady Bros Racing, who got Diego to his calm estate. I think he and Jackson are going to work really well together. And I really like the long-term prospects of what Flores are building here with this 23 team. I think that obviously they were terrible last season. But I think they learned from their mistakes. They said, hey, we're not going to take Michael Racing sloppy seconds anymore. We're going to build our own thing, and we want to win races. We want to compete for championships, and you're not going to compete for championships being, Toyota's development team. They had to go out there. They had to make this move. They bring the former Craftsman Series champion in. We know Jackson obviously won a championship. He's won 4 races. He's won 2 Comscope duels. So he's a guy that has shown flashes. He knows what he's doing. We'll see if he can figure it out truly at the cup level. I think that certainly remains to be seen. But overall, you can't deny his resume, and it's a lot better than most coming out of the Craftsman Series. So I think it'll just be key to see if they can kind of tap into that undiscovered potential with Jackson, and really to see if Jackson can resurrect his career before it's too late. Because I think that if he can't figure it out here, I don't think he gets another shot. After this 3-year deal that he's on runs out. And then the other huge move I'll still see in a document is obviously Graham Darty succeeding Nick Orchidi in the iconic number 2 for Orchidi Bros Racing, and really continuing that kind of rebuild for OBR heading into the rest of this decade in the 2030s. Diego now is 35 years old. They have Carson Schmidt in place. He's 23 and obviously developing into something special. We'll talk about him more in a second. But this is, a big opportunity for Graham Darty. And he is really I would say, the pinnacle of the ASCA's next youth movement. When you think of these young superstars that are coming up today, this next generation of drivers, the first thing that pops to many people's mind is Graham Darty. The youngest winner in ASCA history at 17 years old. And I'll never forget him fending off Colin Ward in a photo finish for that first win at San Diego. I don't think anyone saw that coming. He hadn't even graduated high school at that point, and he goes out, qualifies on pole. Not only qualifies on pole, but then converts that pole into a victory. And at 17 years old, that's unheard of. Not even a Chris Barrymore, not even a Laquan Scranton. None of those guys had done anything remotely close to that. And then he, with all the hype surrounding him heading into his full-time Craftsman campaign, he follows that up by going out winning the championship, casually beating Colin Ward and Marcus Edwards at only 18 years old. And that's when you knew he was the real deal. Now, he had some struggles last season. I would say it was a step back from his rookie year, but obviously you can have a hard time defending your championship. No driver has done that in ASC history, gone back to back. Specifically at the Craftsman level. So it's tough, to see how he's going to adjust at the cup level, again, considering he is only 20 years old. I think he's going to struggle a little bit out the gate. I don't think he's going to hit the ground running, but I do think by the end of the year, he's going to really start to hit his stride and really take, some positive steps in his development. And then we'll be talking about him with a sophomore surge heading into 2027. And he's kind of got a leg up on some of these other young stars we look at, with a Tony Delisle and a Gunnar Thorson and a Kaden Dunham and Zach Tretton and, some of these other names that you hear about when you discuss this ASCA next generation. I think he's got a leg up on him, because he is a year older. He's a year ahead of a Delbow and a Thorson in their development tree. I think we'll see both of those names in the Cup Series next season as rookies. Darty's got that leg up. So I think that's huge for him. And like I said, we'll see how he does this season. I'm not expecting much, but I am expecting he runs away with Rookie of the Year pretty easily. I don't think he's got much competition in that department. He should have that on lock. So let's talk about the championship fight from last year. And I know, it's tiring to hear about Todd Kidd and Yegor Key again and again and again because it's all we talked about last season on the podcast. It seemed like they put on such a fantastic championship fight, going to war for 16 straight weeks, actually 17 straight weeks. And each and every week, just delivering haymakers to one another. And it all came down to a tiebreaker at season's end. And obviously, Kid prevailed with the championship. The question is, will we see an Act Two? Basically, will we see these two fighting for the championship again this season? And I actually think the answer to this question is going to be no. And I think it's just because everyone besides Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Ortiz Burrs Racing was really they they were obviously competing, last season, but they had one eye forward to this year, 2026. And now that they've got their regulation plans in place and all that, you know, it's going to be a much more level playing field. I think Toyota is definitely going to be back. I think that B level teams like Snoods and, CJ Barrymore Racing and Dexter Andrews Motorsports, I think that they're going to be taking a step back up, this season. I think they were really kind of left in the dust last year because they had to go half and half between the old regs and the new regs. But this year, they're all going to be focused on the new regs. So, I think that they're going to take a step up. I think, which means we're going to see Healy and Atwood back up at the front. I think Lucas Sambert is another underrated name that needs to be talked about more. We could see him have a breakout season. Norm Lester, another guy, Taylor Motorsports. I think they're going to be up there, for Toyota as well. Ross Jackson, can he be up there? I don't think it might not be a championship for Ross Jackson, but who knows? Crazier things have happened, you know, in terms of Cinderella stories. I just think there's going to be much more competition for these guys, for Todd Kidd and Diego, than just Shane Park, because that was really the only guy that was even close to their wavelength all year. And even Park obviously kind of fell off towards the second half of the season. I think that Park will be much more active in the championship battle with an extra year of experience. And, for Todd Kidd, I mean, his entire team, I think he's going to be competing against for the title. No team orders this year. They brought in Chris Barrymore to win a championship. They still have Colin Ward developing, and we know the crazy. He's got nuts on dirt this year. We're going to talk about him more in a second, but I think he could be a dark horse title threat, and the same applies for Diego. His toughest competition might come from in-house. Carson Schmidt, entering his fourth season, continues to get better and better and better by the year. He's just yearning to take that next step into really becoming a title contender. I don't see why it couldn't be this year. So there's just so much competition. You got Braden Bennett. I think that Brent Reynolds going to bounce back. Randall Woods, who knows what he's going to show in his farewell tour. There's just going to be so much competition than last year. I don't think it's going to be an Act Two. Now, that's not to say that they won't be title contenders, but I just think there's I would say 7, 8 guys that you could really throw in that bucket of real deal championship contenders. Whereas last year you kind of knew it was Kidd or Keating and Park that were the only guys that really had much of a shot. So, um, yeah, each of their respective organizations got better. Their driver lineups got better. And I think that will hurt Todd Kidd much more than Diego Urquidy. But for Diego, he's also 35 years old, so when is Father Time going to start to catch up with him? It's going to have to happen eventually. It happens to everyone. It happened to his older brother. When is Father Time going to catch up with him? That's the real question. So we'll see. We shall see. Let's talk about. Here's an interesting topic we just talked about with the championship contenders. Let's talk about this I wouldn't say they're the next generation. They're kind of the forgotten generation, I would say, of young talent in the Cup Series right now. Rising ASCA stars. When I say these four names, Braden Bennett, Shane Park, Carson Schmidt, and Colin Ward, they're all 25 years old or younger, but they're not really a part of this next youth movement that we're talking about, because the youngest of them, Carson Schmidt, 23 years old, born in 2003. But then when we talk about youth movement, we're talking about guys born in 2006, 2007, 2008, like Doherty, not Ward, Delval, Thorson, Dunham, all these guys, they're about 3 to 4 years younger, so these guys are kind of just in no man's land, but they're also entering the prime of their careers. So they're obviously not old, but they're also not young per se. They're in no man's land, but they're in the prime of their careers. And that means that, they're becoming perennial race win contenders. We've seen Bennett, Park, and Schmidt all win races. Colin Ward is going to win a race, at least one race this season. I don't even think that's a question. He will win a race. And we obviously know he can win in the Craftsman series. So he's a born and bred winner in whatever he steps into. But will these guys be able to make a serious title run now that they are entering the prime of their careers? And if I had to bet my money on one of these guys to get it done, I'd bet my money on Shane Park. Um, Obviously, I think it's just more so for Park the proven track record. We've seen he's finished top three in points each of the last two seasons. He's proven to be an elite level driver, in this sport right now. And the odd thing for Park is that he really needs to clean up his oval racing, which is odd, considering, this is American Stock Car Association, 14 of the 17 races take place on ovals, and yet Park only has one oval win in his Cup Series career, which is odd. Just very odd to me. But I think that's actually a good thing, because obviously the bulk of the schedule is ovals, so naturally, if you're a good driver, you're going to win on ovals naturally. But, when it comes to road courses, he can also make up a ton of ground on the likes of a Braden Bennett or a Carson Schmidt, who aren't the greatest. They're not terrible, but they're not great on road courses. He's going to have to duel with his teammate Colin Ward, but Shane Park, incredible on road courses. He just needs to clean up his oval racing. But obviously, when you finish top three in points back-to-back seasons, that means you're doing something right. Braden Bennett, I think, has the second best chance out of these guys. Obviously, what we saw from him last season um, was flat out incredible. Dragging a um, I I'm struggling to put in the words because it wasn't a tractor that he was driving, but we'll just call it mid. We'll call it a mid Camry he was driving for Michael White Racing. It was mid. And he dragged that car to best of the rest, basically, fourth in points, 2 wins on the season. 2 wins. I get they were both at short tracks, but 2 wins on the season. That's incredible, considering none of his teammates had a win. None of his teammates had a win. Bennett had two. And mind you, it was only a second season, fourth in points. So now you head into his third season. He's 25 years of age. He gets more experience, and hopefully he gets a car that's not mid, a car that's championship caliber, equipment championship caliber. He could very well be right up there with Todd Kidd and Diego Arquette competing for a championship. I think for third, I'm actually going to put Colin Ward as the third most likely to make a title run this season. And his odds for the championship this year are 20-1. I would take that in a heartbeat. I would take that in a heartbeat. 20-1 odds to win the championship this year. Absolutely, I'd take that. I think he's poised to have another sophomore series like Braden Bennett did. He just had a lot of bad luck that kind of derailed his rookie campaign. Um, a lot of things that weren't even his fault. You can't even say things that he needs to clean up. He was just wrong place, wrong time. Stuff like blowing a tire at what was it, Utah, while he was in the top five. Or I know he was caught up in the big one at Ajax. He was caught up in that kid Jackson kerfuffle in the Apple 225. There's just things where there's nothing that he could have done differently in situations like those. And obviously, we know this guy is a natural born winner. All he does is win, win, and win some more. I think he's going to win multiple races this season. I think he's going to win at least one of these road courses, steal one of those from Shane Park. The duels between Ward and Park on road courses, I think, is what I'm most excited to see this season, especially in that Michigan doubleheader. Oh boy, I can't wait for those. That's going to be impeccable stuff. But yeah, I got Colin Ward as the third most likely of these guys to do it. I got it. He is only entering his second season, so he only has 1 year that we can kind of glean off of. But I do like the potential of Ward to take that next step, and he could very well become a title contender this season. Who knows? And then fourth is Carson Schmidt. And there's no disrespect to Carson Schmidt here. But I'm just not as sold on him as I am compared to a Bennett, a Park, or a Ward. I just think that all three of those guys have more raw talent than Carson Schmidt does. And again, that's nothing against Carson Schmidt. He's an Intel Shootout winner. He's won multiple cup races. He has really stabilized a number 12 team that for years at Arkady Bros Racing was poverty. Arkady Bros Racing has been begging to find a number 3 driver that can back up Nick and Diego. And, how unfortunate is it that, once Nick finally starts to regress, they finally do get that driver again in Carson Schmidt. But now he can build with Graham Darty and help them carry them into, the 2030s and beyond. But yeah, for Carson Schmidt, I think that he certainly can take the next step, but we also do have to consider if Diego's in championship contention again, I think team orders are certainly still going to be at play. It is called Arkady Bros Racing for a reason. Diego will always get priority. And, as long as he's still got it, Schmidt's never going to be the true number 1. So I do have a harder time, picking Schmidt to make a title push because obviously the team is focused on helping Diego make his title push first and foremost. But I wouldn't put it past Schmidt to really take it to these guys this season, and we'll see how he does. Let's briefly talk about the changes to the 2026 schedule. So this year features the largest Ajax Cup schedule in history. In modern era history, I should say. 17 races on the calendar this season, up from 16, because we do have a Michigan road course doubleheader in the month of April. We're gonna have a race on, I believe it's Saturday afternoon and Sunday night. That's how that's gonna work. So there's that. That's gonna be really fun. I definitely cannot wait to see how that one turns out. A couple twin 75 lap duels, basically. That's what that's gonna be. And I think it's a really neat idea for the ASCA to once again kind of spice up the action at Michigan. Especially after Shane Park, he put the field to bed about 15 laps into that race last season. So I think it's really interesting for them to try a doubleheader. The sport's never done that before, a doubleheader. So I think that one at Michigan is going to be really fun. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. And then another big change is Computer Motor Speedway. Finally, gets a much needed repave. And this is something that Tommy Woods, of course, would argue should have happened years ago, but it finally did happen eventually. And I think that's huge. I really do. It's going to completely change the racing there because, as we saw from Dusting, everyone was lined up on the bottom. And that's how it's going to be, I think, for the first, 3 to 4 years of the track being back in use. Everyone's going to be right on the bottom of the racetrack, because you got to break in the rest of the grooves. But um, I'm certainly going to miss the worn out track surface, the effect that it had on tire wear and all that stuff. But it's a much faster track now. It's basically West Virginia light, I would say. And that's how it's going to be for these first 3 to 4 years. So the speeds, I think, are going to make up for what you're going to be lacking in tire wear. And I definitely cannot wait for that Windows 300 weekend to really kind of see it in action. And I guess we'll see it first in action for the All-Star race. That'll be fun. But then the Windows 300 weekend, of course, that one's going to go crazy. So definitely cannot wait to see that. And then also a minor change. For the Craftsman Series, no Tinder 125. That has been replaced with a support race at Utah. And then speaking of the West Coast swing, I believe San Diego and Denver swapped dates. So Denver is now the 11th race on the calendar, and San Diego is the 12th race on the calendar. So that's just a minor swap, but that's just to kind of clean up the logistics a bit with no more West Virginia for the Craftsman Series, no more second West Virginia race date. And yeah, so there's that. So we talked about Cup a lot, but let's briefly discuss Craftsman for a bit. And there's a lot to talk about in Craftsman. I think that obviously, if you've been paying attention to Journey to the Top, the new reality TV series, the official ASCA YouTube has been putting out, you would know obviously the three names that everyone's paying attention to in Craftsman this year: Gunnar Thorson, Tony Novile II, and Kaden Dunn. The spotlight is obviously on those three guys, and everyone expects them to be right up at the front, competing for race wins, competing for victories. Obviously, everyone expects the reigning champion, Sean Wooden, to be right up at the front, competing for race wins, and we'll see if he can defend his title and become Mr. Three-time at the Craftsman level. So all eyes are on those guys. But I think that when you look at this rookie class, there's some really intriguing names that you're looking at here. I think that a guy that's going quite a bit under the radar is Zach Tretton, 18 years of age, San Diego, California, born native, four-star prospect, California kid, like I just said. This guy, Jimmy Hood, Hall of Fame talent, obviously, is incredibly high on this kid. And if Jimmy Hood thinks he's good, then I think he's good. So, I want to keep my eye on Zach Tretton. I get he's kind of a year ahead of schedule because of everything that happened with the silly season with Hood Motorsports. But I think that's huge for Tretton to making his debut this season. And we're going to see how he does. And another name I think that a lot of people are sleeping on is Jordan Reinhardt, 20 years old. Mind you, this is an Ivy League graduate. He went to Columbia University. If you're wondering, I think he's actually 20 or 21 years old. But he's an Ivy League graduate. If you're wondering why he's not starting his race career at 17, 18 years old, that's because he was busy graduating with a bachelor's degree in computer science from Columbia University. So he certainly has something to fall back on if this whole ASCA deal doesn't work out. But he's not a pay driver either. I get his dad's worth $200 million. He's a big shot on the New York Stock Exchange. I get all that. But Reinhardt proved last season the kid has talent. He proved that in his debut race where he was getting absolutely awful restarts every single time. I feel like he dropped back like 6 spots on the restart, but he just slowly and surely claws way back to the front, claws way back to the front, regroup, claws way back to the front. And obviously ended up finishing top 5 in his debut. So the kid's got a ton of talent, and I'm definitely excited to see what he does this season. I think he's another dark horse rookie of the year. Not many people are talking about, and they should be talking about him much more. So definitely keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on Zach Tretton. Those two, I think a lot more people need to be discussing as maybe dark horse title threats. Who knows? We've seen rookies win the Craftsman Championship 3 out of the last 5 years. Who knows? They could go on and run. They could win a championship. But yeah, so definitely cannot wait for that. And yeah, so one more thing to discuss here, though. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time. It is Speedweeks. Speedweeks starts tomorrow. I know, you know. I can't believe it. It feels like all season went by like that. It feels like we were just wrapping it up. We discussed Woods' retirement, and then obviously the podcast was gone for a bit. But hey, we're back, and well, here we are. Time to start another new season. Driver profiles just got posted, and all the preseason hype trains, and all this other stuff. But we're gonna get right back to racing. 66-day off season. It's over. It's time to go back to action. And like I said, it starts with Speed Weeks. And we'll start with the Intel Shootout. I'll be honest, I really have no idea what to expect in this race. This race is just I wouldn't say it's unpredictable because we've seen it is kind of unpredictable now because a lot of the guys that win this race are retired, like Nick Ricciardi and Dan Rogers. They used to win this race every year. They're gone. They're obviously retired or racing somewhere else. So, Diego obviously is a huge threat, but he should have had this race in the bag last year. He threw a horrible block, and his teammate Carson Schmidt ended up getting the job done. Can he repeat in the shootout? He very well could. For this race, I'm not going to say it's a crapshoot because of what we're going to talk about here in a second, but Doug Bowden's also not in this race. If Doug Bowden was in this race, I think he would be my easy selection to win it. As it stands, I'm probably just going to go with the boring pick here and pick the reigning Cup champion, Todd Kidd. Just because he has won the last 2 Ajax 200s. He's never won a shootout before, but I'll take my chances with the guy who's won here 2 straight years. So yeah, I'll take Todd Kidd. Why not? But anyone can really win this race. Just kind of depends on how things work out. Let's get to the next topic of discussion: favorites to win the Ajax 200 poll. I would say that I know we have all these new regulations and this and that, whatever, but if you're not a Chevy, you can forget about it. They have had a stranglehold on qualifying for, I would say, the last 7, 8 years. You have to go back to a decade ago. 2016 was the last time a non-Chevy won pole for the Ajax 200. That being Ryan Dixon in his rookie season. So it's been a decade since a non-bow tie won pole position. I know there's entirely new regulations and sweeping changes and this and that and all that, but I'd be shocked if a Chevy doesn't win pole. I think that favorites to win the pole, I think you certainly have to look at Snoots, Greg Haley, Lucas Sambert. Sambert was on the front row last season. Ronnie Woods Motorsports. Any one of those 4 guys can win it. Park, Ward, Barrymore, Kidd, any one of those guys can get it done. But I think it's going to be between those 2 teams. DAM has had speed in the past, pole speed in the past. Revolution Racing, I think pulled a surprise pull out of their ass in 2024, if I recall correctly. I think they did. I don't know where that came from. I don't expect that to continue this time around. I don't think Toby Beckett repeats what Cameron Barrymore did in 2024 at all, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, so there's that. So maybe it's the one pole. If it's not a States Enterprises driver or it's not a Ronnie Motorsports driver, I doubt it's gonna happen. So screw it. I'll go with Lucas Sandberg. Why not? He was on the outside of the front row last season. I say he converts it into a pole this year. Now, here's an interesting topic, and people don't believe this when it comes to restrictor plate racing in the ASCA. But restrictor plate racing is a lot more calculated than people think. I always have to correct myself when I say it's a crapshoot because it's really not. It really isn't. When you sit atop of the pit box and you look at the data that these crew chiefs have on their computers, when you look at the data that these spotters have up on the spotter stand that they're telling their drivers in real time, you look at the data that these drivers now have on their digital dashboards, analytics and data and percentage points, they all play a huge role, especially at Ajax Super Speedway, in kind of determining what moves these drivers make. If going with a run with, let's say, a Diego Urquidy pushing you versus, I don't know, a Toby Beckett pushing you, there's a huge difference there. So they're going to tell you that in real time, the probability of, which move is going to work, which move isn't going to work, which lane should you block, which lane shouldn't you block. There's a lot more number crunching that goes into all this than you would think. It's not just, oh, we're running in these big packs, these drivers are just doing whatever. They just want to try to stay in first or get to the lead or all that. It's much more calculated. This isn't checkers. This is chess. This is actually 200-mile-an-hour chess. When you're watching the Ajax 200 this Saturday, it's going to be chess. And it's going to be strategic warfare from these teams and trying to position their drivers at the right spot, trying to give them the most high percentage probability moves. And you have to strike a delicate balance, though, because you don't want to give your driver too much information. You overload him, and then he misses a key opportunity. Or, he gets distracted and he gets sloppy and he makes a bad block or he makes a bad move and causes the big one. There's little margin for error, and these teams are trying to, kind of lower that margin for error much more by giving their driver, detailed numbers on the percentage is for how it's going to work. Basically, giving them analytics in real time on the percentage of their move playing out. So I think that analytics are going to play a huge role, a huge factor in who wins, for sure. I think that the drivers that listen to the analytics are going to do really well this week. And the drivers that don't and just decide to wing it, they're not going to do so hot, or they're going to cause a big accident. Analytics are the new wave of the ASCA, but they play a big role at Ajax Super Speedway, I would say, than anywhere else on the calendar, which sounds odd. But, restricted play racing is much more calculated than I think a lot of people want to make it out to be quite honest with you. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So, yeah. So then one final topic to discuss on Speedweeks. Let's make picks for the Craftsman Series season opener and the Cup season opener. So I already picked Todd Kidd to win in the shootout. I don't think he goes back-to-back, though. But we'll start with the Craftsman Series season opener. Um, Doug Bowden's in this race, so I'm going to pick Doug Bowden. Until further notice, I'm not picking against Doug Bowden, especially after he went from 7th to 1st and somehow held off the field the last time we were here. I'm not picking against Doug Bowden anytime soon at Ajax Superspeedway. I think he's cemented himself as the best plate racer in the sport. He's kind of usurped that role from Diego Urquidy. And yeah, so Doug Bowden, especially in Craftsman Series competition, I'm going to pick him to win the Craftsman Series season opener. However, I'm not picking him to win the Ajax 200. And I don't think it's going to be Todd Kidd either, which is shocking considering these two have been the only two to win here over the past 2 years. So I'm not picking neither of them. It's really tough, though, for this one. But I am going to go with Colin Ward to score his first win in the Ajax 200. And his track record here is really underrated. In the Craftsman Series, it's ridiculous. I think he had a 3.0 or something crazy average finish. He had 2 wins in the season openers in 2023 and 2024. Last year, he finished 3rd in the Cup Series season opener and then was obviously caught up in the big one. That was his first ever DNF at his home track. Colin Ward is always fast here, is always up at the front, and more importantly, is always up at the front when it matters most. I think this is going to be, the time that he scores his first of many Cup wins. And it's going to be in the Ajax 200 at his home track. Give me Colin Ward to win the Ajax 200 and give me Doug Bowden to win the Craftsman Series season opener at the Napa Auto Parts 100. Whew, that was a lot of talking, but we had to get through a lot. This was basically the pilot episode, the season preview, and the Speedweeks preview. And obviously, it's a week long of racing action, so we had a lot to preview. And we had to preview a season long of racing action, 4 months of action to be exact, upcoming 17 straight weeks of racing. I can't believe it. Another season is upon us, and I'm excited, man. There's so many unknowns, so many uncertainties. I think the championship is the most wide open it's ever been in this sport, and we're going to be in for a treat in 2026. So yeah, thank you to anyone that somehow managed to listen this long. I salute you tremendously, and we will see you in a week's time to recap all the action from what should be a very eventful Speedweeks, recap what we learned after the Ajax 200, and begin previewing the rest of the 2026 campaign, looking forward heading into the streets of Computerville. So this is Charles Fallon signing out.